I didn't expect that night to dredge up the past I thought I had buried a decade ago. Life had moved on. Well, I had moved on, but it seemed fate had other plans. As I adjusted my tie in the mirror, I glanced at Sophia, radiant in a midnight blue dress that clung to her figure with an effortless elegance. Her laughter filled our home, reminding me that second chances weren't just cliches. Sophia suggested we try a new upscale restaurant downtown, and I agreed, wanting to surprise her. She deserved nights like this, reminders of how much I cherished her. When we arrived, the scent of freshly baked bread and the low hum of jazz welcomed us. The restaurant exuded sophistication, its warm lighting bouncing off crystal glasses and polished wood. As we were ushered to our table, I caught sight of a familiar figure. My stomach tightened in an instant. Alicia. 10 years had passed since the woman who once promised me forever chose wealth and status over the life we had built together. Seeing her now, radiant and surrounded by people, was like an old wound being poked. I thought of walking past unnoticed, but Alicia's gaze locked onto mine. Her smile froze the air in my lungs, but I plastered on an indifferent expression, praying she would just let me be. After all, I wasn't the same man she left behind. I had risen from those ashes, hadn't I? And yet, the sight of her ignited old doubts I thought I had extinguished long ago. As I pulled out Sophia's chair and took my seat, I could feel Alicia's presence across the room. It was like the universe was testing me, asking if the scars of betrayal still held power over my life. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. Would I prove to myself that I had moved on? Or would Alicia's presence unravel the progress I thought I had made? I had hoped Alicia would stay seated, content with whatever wine she was swirling in that oversized glass. But, of course, Alicia was never one to let an opportunity pass her by, especially one that involved an audience. Michael. Her voice carried across the room, loud enough for heads to turn. Her heels clicked against the floor as she approached, the sound grating against my nerves. Sophia glanced at me, her brow furrowing slightly. "Who's that?" she asked quietly, but before I could respond, Alicia was at our table. "Well, isn't this a surprise?" she said, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. Her smile was sharp, her tone dripping with mockery. "I almost didn't recognize you, Michael. It's been, what, 10 years?" I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Something like that." Her gaze shifted to Sophia, her perfectly arched eyebrow lifting in a way that made my blood simmer. "And who is this? Your date?" The way she said it, the implication that Sophia was somehow temporary or unworthy, sent a wave of irritation through me. "This is my wife, Sophia," I said evenly. Alicia's smile faltered for a split second before she recovered. "Wife? Well, congratulations, Michael. I see you've managed to move on in your own way." Sophia extended a polite hand, but Alicia ignored it, instead crossing her arms and glancing around the room dramatically. "I didn't think I'd ever see you in a place like this. It's a little upscale for your usual tastes, isn't it?" I clenched my jaw but refused to rise to the bait. "Sophia and I like to explore new places," I replied simply. "Oh, how charming," Alicia said, her laugh like nails on a chalkboard. "Well, I suppose everyone deserves a little indulgence now and then. But I must say, Michael, this place might be a bit out of your league. Don't you agree?" Her voice was loud enough to draw the attention of nearby diners. I could feel their eyes on us, their curiosity thick in the air. Alicia thrived on this, being the center of attention, making others feel small to elevate herself. Sophia's hand brushed mine under the table, a silent reassurance that she was there, steady and composed. But my pride stung, and the familiar anger I thought I had buried threatened to rise. Still, I forced myself to remain calm. "It's nice to see you again, Alicia," I said, my tone flat and dismissive. "But my wife and I are here to enjoy our evening. If you'll excuse us." But Alicia wasn't done. "Enjoy your evening?" she repeated, laughing loudly. "Michael, come on. Let's not pretend. This isn't a place for people like you." Sophia's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of irritation on her usually serene face. But she said nothing, her silence a quiet strength that reminded me why I had fallen in love with her. Alicia's words cut deep, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I simply leaned back in my chair, meeting her gaze with unwavering calm. "Enjoy your night, Alicia," I said firmly. For a moment, she hesitated, perhaps surprised that I hadn't taken her bait. Then she smirked and turned away, her heels clicking as she returned to her table. Sophia reached for my hand, her touch warm and grounding. "Who was that?" she asked again, her tone soft but curious. "No one important," I said, my voice steadier now. "Just someone from the past." And as I looked across the room at Alicia's retreating figure, I felt a flicker of something unexpected, pity. Because while she might have been the same Alicia, sharp-tongued and arrogant, I was no longer the man she could so easily hurt. As I watched Alicia retreat to her table, the past came rushing back like an old wound reopening. Her voice, her laugh, the condescending smirk, all of it carried echoes of a time I had worked so hard to forget. For a moment, I wasn't in that elegant restaurant with Sophia. I was back in the life I had shared with Alicia, a life that had ended in betrayal and humiliation. Alicia had always been magnetic, the kind of woman who commanded a room without trying. When we first met, I had been enamored by her confidence and beauty, blind to the cracks beneath the surface. Back then, I thought love could conquer anything, even her growing obsession with wealth and status. But love wasn't enough, not for Alicia. She wanted the finer things, the glamorous life, and she wasn't shy about letting me know my modest career wouldn't cut it. At first, I tried to meet her expectations. I worked late nights, took on extra projects, and saved every penny, thinking that if I could give her what she wanted, she'd finally be happy. But it was never enough. I remember the day I found out about her affair. She didn't even try to deny it. "Michael," she had said, her tone dripping with exasperation, "you can't seriously think I'm going to spend my life living paycheck to paycheck? Ryan can give me the life I deserve." Ryan, the younger, wealthier man who had swooped in and offered her the world, or at least the illusion of it. She left without looking back, and I was left to pick up the pieces of a life I thought was solid. The divorce was quick and brutal, leaving me with an empty apartment and a mountain of self-doubt. For months, I questioned everything, my worth, my choices, even my ability to move on. But time has a way of softening the edges of pain. Slowly, I rebuilt my life. I found new routines, new friends, and eventually, new hope. And then I met Sophia. Sophia was everything Alicia wasn't: kind, patient, and grounded. She didn't care about designer labels or fancy cars. She cared about me, about the small moments we shared that made life meaningful. With her, I found a peace I hadn't thought possible. She taught me that love wasn't about grand gestures or extravagant gifts. It was about partnership, about weathering life's storms together. And now, 10 years later, Alicia stood there, still trying to wield the power she once had over me. But it wasn't the same. I wasn't the same. Her words, once sharp enough to cut, now felt hollow, like a faded echo of a life I no longer recognized. "Michael." Sophia's voice pulled me back to the present. She was watching me closely, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "I'm fine," I said, squeezing her hand. And for the first time in years, I realized I meant it. As I looked at Alicia across the room, surrounded by laughter and the clinking of glasses, I felt no anger, no resentment. Just a quiet understanding that the man she had left behind was gone. In his place was someone stronger, someone who had learned the hard way what truly mattered. And as I turned back to Sophia, her smile grounding me in the present, I knew one thing for certain. I was exactly where I was meant to be. The restaurant was alive with the clinking of glasses and soft murmurs of conversation. But for me, the atmosphere felt charged, electric. Alicia was still within sight, her laughter ringing out like a bell trying too hard to sound joyous. I focused on Sophia instead, her serene presence always grounding me. Little did I know, the balance of the evening was about to shift dramatically. Sophia had stepped away to make a quick phone call, leaving me at the table with my thoughts. That's when Alicia, emboldened by her earlier performance, decided to return. Michael, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I didn't mean to upset you earlier. You know me. Sometimes I'm just brutally honest. She smiled, a thin, insincere curve of her lips. I'm not upset, I replied calmly, refusing to rise to her bait. Oh, come on, she said, leaning in slightly, her perfume overwhelming. I was just teasing. I mean, it's not like you've suddenly become a millionaire, right? But hey, at least you seem happy. That's what matters, I suppose. Her patronizing tone lit a flicker of irritation in my chest, but I kept my composure. Alicia was still playing the same game, but I wasn't the same player. Before I could respond, Sophia returned, her graceful stride commanding attention without effort. She carried herself with an elegance that couldn't be bought, a quiet confidence that didn't need to be flaunted. Alicia turned to face her, her expression shifting into one of feigned politeness. Oh, you're back. I was just catching up with Michael. We go way back, you know? Sophia smiled politely, but didn't reply immediately. Instead, she took her seat, her movements deliberate and composed. Then, she turned her gaze to Alicia, her expression unreadable. I couldn't help but overhear some of your comments earlier, Sophia said, her tone light yet carrying an unmistakable edge. It seems you have some strong opinions about Michael and his presence here. Alicia stiffened slightly but quickly recovered, flashing a dismissive smile. Oh, it's all in good fun. I didn't mean anything by it. Sophia tilted her head, studying Alicia with the kind of measured patience that could unnerve anyone. Then, she delivered the words that changed everything. Well, it's interesting you say that, Sophia began, her voice calm and even. Because, as the owner of this restaurant, I can assure you that Michael and I are exactly where we're supposed to be. The color drained from Alicia's face. For a moment, she looked as though she'd misheard. You own this place? Yes, Sophia replied, her smile serene but firm. My husband and I often enjoy dining here. It's one of my favorite places, though I suppose I might be biased. The room seemed to hold its breath. Alicia's confident facade cracked, her expression flickering between disbelief and humiliation. Oh, I didn't realize, Alicia stammered, her composure faltering for the first time. Sophia leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. That's all right. Sometimes it's easy to make assumptions about people without knowing their full story. The words were simple, yet they carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. Alicia, who had spent the evening trying to diminish me, now found herself on unstable ground. Well, this has been lovely, Alicia mumbled, clearly eager to retreat. I should probably get back to my table. Sophia nodded graciously. Of course. Enjoy your evening. As Alicia hurried away, I couldn't help but marvel at Sophia's poise. She hadn't raised her voice or resorted to insults, yet she had completely dismantled Alicia's arrogance with a few well-placed words. When I looked at Sophia, she met my gaze with a small smile, her hand reaching for mine. Are you all right? She asked softly. I'm more than all right, I said, unable to keep the admiration from my voice. In that moment, I realized that while Alicia had spent years chasing wealth and status, Sophia had quietly built a life defined by integrity and strength, and I, against all odds, had been lucky enough to be part of it. The tables had truly turned, and this time, I was on the winning side. Alicia hurried back to her table, her movements stiff and awkward, a far cry from the confident strut she had displayed earlier. I could see her trying to salvage her composure, but it was too late. The weight of Sophia's revelation hung in the air like a palpable force, and the tables nearby whispered in hushed tones, undoubtedly dissecting the scene they had just witnessed. Sophia, on the other hand, remained perfectly calm. She leaned back in her chair, sipping her wine as though nothing had happened. Her elegance wasn't forced. It was natural, and that was what rattled Alicia the most. I watched as Alicia fidgeted at her table, her eyes darting around the room. She was no longer the center of attention in the way she craved. Instead, she was the subject of curiosity, her earlier arrogance now replaced with visible discomfort. You didn't have to say anything, I told Sophia, though my tone carried no reproach, only admiration. She glanced at me with a soft smile. Of course I did. No one gets to talk to you that way, Michael. Especially not someone like her. Her words warmed me, and I couldn't suppress a small smile of my own. Sophia wasn't one to seek confrontation, but she wasn't afraid to stand her ground when it mattered. And this moment, had mattered. Across the room, Alicia made a clumsy attempt to recover. She waved down the waiter and spoke in an exaggeratedly cheerful tone, as though ordering another bottle of wine could erase what had just transpired. But her confidence was gone, replaced by a brittle edge that couldn't be hidden. A few minutes later, Alicia mustered the courage to approach our table once more. This time, her demeanor was different. She smiled, but it was strained, and her voice lacked the sharpness it had carried earlier. "Michael, Sophia," she began, her tone overly bright. "I just wanted to say, I didn't mean anything by my comments earlier. It was all in jest, you know. I hope you didn't take it the wrong way." Sophia set her wine glass down and looked up at Alicia with a calm expression. "Apology accepted," she said simply, her tone so composed it left no room for further discussion. Alicia hesitated, clearly unsure whether to stay or leave. "It's just, I didn't realize," she faltered, her gaze flicking to me as though searching for an ally. "You didn't realize I had a wife like Sophia," I said, my voice steady. "I understand, Alicia. People often underestimate others when they're too focused on themselves." The words landed with precision, and Alicia's cheeks flushed. She opened her mouth as if to respond but quickly closed it again. Instead, she offered a tight smile and mumbled, "Well, enjoy the rest of your evening." As she walked away, I leaned back in my chair and exhaled deeply. For years, I had imagined what I might say if I ever saw Alicia again, how I might confront the pain and betrayal she had left me with. But now, I realized I didn't need to say much at all. The person I had become, the life I had built with Sophia, spoke louder than any words ever could. Sophia reached across the table, her hand finding mine. "You okay?" she asked softly. I nodded, squeezing her hand. "Better than okay. Thank you." "You don't have to thank me," she said with a small laugh. She dug her own grave. I just handed her the shovel. We both laughed quietly, the tension of the evening dissipating. Around us, the restaurant carried on as if nothing had happened, but I knew the moment had been a turning point, not just for the night, but for me. For so long, Alicia had occupied a space in my mind that she no longer deserved. Tonight, that space had been reclaimed, and as I looked at Sophia, radiant and unbothered, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. She wasn't just my wife. She was my partner, my equal, and the embodiment of everything I had once thought impossible. Alicia might have walked away embarrassed, but I walked away victorious. Not in the petty sense, but in the quiet, deeply satisfying knowledge that I had truly moved on. It wasn't long before Alicia's husband arrived, a man I'd never met but whose presence somehow didn't surprise me. He walked into the restaurant wearing a suit that seemed just a bit too big for him, his shoulders slouched with a weariness that wasn't just physical. I watched as he approached Alicia's table, his expression strained, his movements hesitant. This was Ryan, the man she had chosen over me all those years ago. Alicia's demeanor shifted the moment he arrived. Gone was the bravado, the sharp-tongued arrogance she'd displayed earlier. Instead, she looked tense, her smile forced as she greeted him. It didn't take much to see the cracks in their facade, the subtle signs of a relationship weighed down by something heavier than time. Ryan leaned in to whisper something to Alicia, and though I couldn't hear the words, her expression told me everything. Her face fell, the forced smile replaced by a flicker of frustration, then resignation. She glanced around the room as if suddenly hyper-aware of the audience she had created earlier. She was no longer the queen of the evening. She was a woman scrambling to hold together the image she'd spent years crafting. I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of emotions watching them. Part of me wanted to revel in the irony of it all. The woman who once left me for a wealthier man now sitting across from someone who looked worn and burdened by life. But another part of me, a quieter, softer part, felt something I hadn't expected: pity. Alicia had always chased the illusion of a perfect life, and now it seemed that illusion was crumbling. Her beauty, once dazzling and effortless, had faded. The confidence she wielded like a weapon had dulled into something brittle and performative. And Ryan, well, he wasn't the man she had described when she left me. He didn't exude wealth or power. He looked tired, defeated, like someone who had carried too many burdens for too long. Sophia noticed my gaze and followed it to Alicia and Ryan. "Is that her husband?" she asked, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "Yes," I said simply. Sophia tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as she studied the pair. "Interesting." That was all she said, but I knew Sophia well enough to understand the depth of her observation. She wasn't the type to gloat, but she could see what I saw, the stark contrast between the image Alicia had tried to project and the reality of her situation. As the evening went on, I found myself reflecting on the years that had passed since Alicia left. Back then, her betrayal had felt like the end of the world. I had spent so many nights wondering what I could have done differently, why I hadn't been enough. But now, sitting across from Sophia, I realized how much I had gained by losing Alicia. Sophia reached for her glass of wine, her movements graceful and assured. "Funny how life works out, isn't it?" she said, her tone light but meaningful. I smiled. "It really is." Across the room, Alicia and Ryan sat in silence, their earlier conversation replaced by a tense quiet. Alicia's shoulders slumped slightly, her once flawless posture giving way to the weight of her circumstances. I wondered if she was thinking about the choices she had made, the path that had led her here. Did she regret leaving me? Did she even remember the man I had been? The man she had dismissed as not good enough? Part of me hoped she did. Not because I wanted her to feel pain, but because I wanted her to see that life wasn't about chasing status or appearances. It was about finding real, lasting joy in the things that truly mattered. Things like partnership, love, and the quiet strength of someone who stood by you no matter what. As the waiter brought our dessert, I glanced at Sophia, who was happily savoring her creme brulee. She caught me watching her and raised an eyebrow. "What?" she asked, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "Nothing," I said, shaking my head. "Just grateful." Her smile softened, and she reached across the table to take my hand. "Me too." At that moment, I felt a profound sense of peace. Alicia and her choices were no longer a shadow over my life. She was a memory, a lesson, and perhaps even a reminder of how far I had come. And as I turned my attention back to Sophia, I realized I didn't need anything more. I already had everything I could ever want. The air in the restaurant felt heavier as Alicia and Ryan sat quietly at their table, their earlier show of composure unraveling under the weight of reality. I watched them out of the corner of my eye, not out of malice, but with a quiet curiosity. The man I used to be would have avoided confrontation, swallowing my words and allowing the moment to pass. But now, something stirred inside me, a need to finally address the ghosts of the past. Sophia, as always, sensed my shift in mood. "You're thinking about saying something, aren't you?" she asked, her voice soft but knowing. I nodded slowly, my gaze fixed on Alicia. "I think it's time." She studied me for a moment before nodding. "Just remember who you are now, Michael. Don't let her drag you back into who you used to be." Her words grounded me, reminding me that this wasn't about revenge or bitterness. It was about closure. I stood and walked toward their table, each step feeling like a bridge between the man I had been and the man I had become. Alicia looked up as I approached, her eyes widening in surprise. For a moment, she seemed to shrink in her chair, as though she hadn't expected me to confront her. Ryan glanced at me, confusion flickering across his tired face. "Alicia," I said, my voice calm but firm, "do you mind if I join you for a moment?" She hesitated, her eyes darting toward Ryan before she forced a strained smile. "Of course, Michael. Please sit." I pulled out a chair and settled into it, meeting her gaze head-on. For the first time in years, I felt no fear, no hesitation, just clarity. "I wasn't planning on this," I began, keeping my tone measured. "But seeing you tonight brought back a lot of memories. Memories I think we both need to face." Alicia shifted uncomfortably, her confidence from earlier completely eroded. "Michael, I don't think this is the time or place. No, I interrupted gently. It is. Because for 10 years, I've carried the weight of what happened between us. And I need you to hear what I have to say. Ryan glanced at Alicia, clearly unsure of what was happening. She avoided his gaze, focusing solely on me. I loved you, Alicia, I said, my voice steady. I gave you everything I had, everything I could, but it was never enough for you. And when you left, you didn't just break my heart. You broke my sense of worth. She flinched at my words, but I pressed on. You told me I wasn't good enough, that I couldn't give you the life you deserved. And for a long time, I believed you. I thought I was the problem, that I was lacking in some way. But I've realized something since then. I leaned forward slightly, my gaze unwavering. The problem wasn't that I wasn't enough. The problem was that you couldn't see what you already had. Alicia's eyes glistened, though she blinked quickly to hide it. Ryan shifted in his seat, visibly uncomfortable but staying silent. You chased wealth and status, Alicia. I continued, my voice softening. You thought those things would make you happy. But look around you. What did it really cost you? She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For once, Alicia had nothing to say. I turned my attention to Ryan, who looked at me with a mix of confusion and unease. Ryan, I don't know you, and I'm not here to judge you. But I hope you both realize that happiness doesn't come from what you have. It comes from who you are and the choices you make. I stood then, feeling lighter than I had in years. That's all I wanted to say. I hope you both find what you're looking for. As I turned to walk away, Alicia's voice stopped me. Michael. I looked back at her, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't expected. Regret? I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For everything. I nodded, offering a small, bittersweet smile. I know. Returning to my table, I felt a profound sense of closure. Sophia looked at me, her expression both curious and proud. How do you feel? She asked as I sat down. I exhaled deeply, a weight lifting from my chest. Free. And for the first time in a long time, I truly meant it. The past no longer held me captive. I had faced it, confronted it, and let it go. And as I reached for Sophia's hand, I knew my future was brighter than ever. As I sat back at our table, I couldn't help but feel a wave of calm washing over me. Confronting Alicia had been cathartic in ways I hadn't expected. But the night wasn't done yet. Alicia, still visibly shaken, turned her attention to Sophia, perhaps thinking she might regain some control of the evening. Sophia, though, was more than ready. Alicia rose from her seat and, in a moment that could only be described as desperate, walked back to our table, this time attempting a different approach. Her tone was no longer condescending but almost pleading, laced with forced politeness. Sophia, I just want to say, Alicia began, her voice faltering slightly. I really didn't mean any harm earlier. I guess I just didn't recognize you too. Michael and I go way back, and I suppose I was caught off guard. Sophia looked up from her wine glass, her expression composed, her posture regal. Alicia stood there, awkwardly shifting her weight, as if expecting Sophia to offer some kind of lifeline. Instead, Sophia simply raised an eyebrow, silently inviting Alicia to continue. I mean, Alicia stammered. It's just impressive, you know? The restaurant, your success. You've done really well for yourself. Sophia set her glass down with deliberate precision and folded her hands on the table. Thank you, she said, her tone neutral but firm. Though I've always believed success is about more than what you own. It's about how you treat people along the way. The subtle jab wasn't lost on Alicia, who flinched slightly. She opened her mouth to respond, but Sophia wasn't finished. You see, Sophia continued, her voice steady and calm. Michael and I built our life together on trust, respect, and perseverance. It wasn't always easy, but we knew what mattered most, character. And I'd like to think that's why we're here today, happy and thriving. Her words were a quiet declaration, not just to Alicia but to everyone within earshot. Sophia wasn't boasting. She was asserting a truth that no one could dispute, and the grace with which she delivered it only added to its weight. Alicia's cheeks flushed, and for a moment, she looked utterly lost. "That's admirable," she said weakly, her earlier bravado reduced to nothing. Sophia tilted her head slightly, studying Alicia with the kind of quiet strength that could make anyone feel small. "It is," she said simply, leaving no room for argument. The silence that followed was deafening. Alicia stood there for a moment longer, as if searching for something, dignity, perhaps, that she couldn't seem to find. Finally, she mumbled something about needing to return to her table and walked away, her steps hurried and uneven. Sophia watched her go, her expression unchanging. When she turned back to me, there was a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "Do you think I was too harsh?" she asked, her tone light. "Not at all," I said, unable to hide my admiration. "You handled that perfectly." She smiled, reaching for my hand. I wasn't trying to embarrass her. I just wanted her to understand that there's more to life than appearances and wealth. "And you did," I said, "better than I ever could have." Sophia squeezed my hand, her touch warm and reassuring. "It's not about competing, Michael. It's about living with integrity. That's what sets us apart." Her words settled in my chest, filling me with a deep sense of gratitude. Alicia's attempt to undermine me had failed, not because I had fought back, but because Sophia's strength and grace had rendered her efforts meaningless. Across the room, Alicia and Ryan sat in tense silence, their earlier energy completely drained. They were a stark contrast to the woman sitting across from me, the woman who had become my partner, my equal, my everything. As the evening continued, I found myself marveling at Sophia's ability to command respect without demanding it, to assert herself without arrogance. She had not only stood by me in my confrontation with Alicia, but had elevated the moment, turning it into a testament to the life we had built together. In that moment, I realized just how lucky I was, not just to have moved on from Alicia, but to have found someone like Sophia. Someone who didn't just compliment me, but inspired me to be better every single day. And as I looked at her, radiant and unshaken, I knew that I had truly left the past behind. With Sophia, I wasn't just living a better life. I was living the life I had always deserved. As we finished our meal, the weight of the evening began to lift. The confrontation with Alicia was behind us, leaving only the quiet satisfaction of having faced the past and emerged unscathed. Sophia, ever the steady presence in my life, sat across from me, her smile soft and genuine. The warmth in her eyes reminded me why none of this mattered anymore. The waiter brought the check, but Sophia waved him off with her usual grace. "It's on the house tonight," she said with a wink. It was her restaurant, after all, and she didn't need to explain herself. We rose from the table, and I instinctively offered her my arm. She took it, and as we walked toward the exit, I felt a surge of pride. Not the shallow, ego-driven kind, but the kind that comes from knowing you've chosen wisely, from seeing the life you've built and realizing it's everything you've ever wanted. As we passed Alicia's table, I noticed her watching us. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes betrayed a mix of emotions: regret, envy, perhaps even a hint of sadness. Ryan sat next to her, staring into his drink, oblivious to the tension hanging in the air. For a moment, our eyes met. I held her gaze, not out of malice, but with a quiet resolve. There was no anger left in me, no lingering bitterness, only the simple truth. I had moved on, and I was happier for it. Alicia opened her mouth as if to say something, but I didn't stop. Whatever she had to say wasn't for me to hear. Not anymore. Sophia squeezed my arm gently. "Ready to go?" she asked, her voice breaking through the quiet tension of the moment. "More than ready," I replied, my focus shifting entirely to her. As we stepped out into the cool night air, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The restaurant's lights cast a warm glow on the sidewalk, but beyond that was the vast, open world, a world full of possibilities, untethered from the past. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, the sound of our footsteps the only noise. Finally, Sophia broke the quiet. "You handled tonight well, Michael. Better than I expected, honestly." I laughed, shaking my head. "You didn't think I'd keep my cool?" "It's not that," she said, smiling. I just know how hard it can be to face someone who hurt you so deeply. Most people either lash out or retreat. But you found balance. That's rare. Her words settled over me, warm and reassuring. I had you there, I said simply. That made all the difference. She stopped walking and turned to face me, her hands resting lightly on my chest. Michael, you don't give yourself enough credit. Tonight wasn't just about me standing up for you. It was about you standing up for yourself, for the life we've built together. I looked at her, the woman who had transformed my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. I couldn't have done it without you, I said. Her smile widened, and she leaned up to kiss me softly. And I couldn't imagine doing this with anyone else. We continued walking, the weight of the night dissolving with each step. As we passed under the streetlights, I found myself reflecting on just how far I'd come. The man I was 10 years ago, heartbroken, insecure, and unsure of his worth, would hardly recognize the man walking beside Sophia now. Alicia had once been the center of my world, but now she was just a chapter in a story that no longer revolved around her. The life I had built with Sophia wasn't just a rebound or a second chance. It was the life I was always meant to have. As we reached the car, I turned to Sophia and opened the door for her, as I always did. She slid in gracefully, and I walked around to the driver's side, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. Driving home, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white, and I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that had shaped me, for the lessons I had learned, and for the woman beside me who had taught me what real love looked like. As I glanced at Sophia, who was humming softly to herself, I knew that I wasn't just leaving Alicia behind. I was leaving behind every doubt, every insecurity, and every piece of the past that no longer served me. The future was wide open, and for the first time, I was ready to embrace it fully. Later that evening, as we sat together on the sofa in our living room, the events of the night seemed like a distant memory. The soft glow of the table lamp bathed the room in a warm light, and the quiet hum of life outside our window was the only sound. Sophia nestled against me, her head resting on my shoulder, and I felt an overwhelming sense of contentment. Tonight was something, wasn't it? She murmured, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. It was, I agreed, running my fingers through her hair absent-mindedly. It wasn't exactly how I pictured our evening going, but I think it turned out for the best. She tilted her head to look at me, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. And how are you feeling? Really? I paused for a moment, letting the question settle. How was I feeling? For years, I had carried the weight of Alicia's betrayal, even after convincing myself I had moved on. Seeing her tonight, confronting her, and walking away had given me a sense of closure I hadn't realized I still needed. Honestly, I said, turning to meet Sophia's gaze, I feel free. Like I finally closed a chapter one didn't even know was still open. She smiled softly, reaching up to touch my cheek. You deserve that, Michael. You've carried so much for so long. I'm glad you can finally let it go. Her words stirred something deep within me, a gratitude that went beyond words. I couldn't have done it without you, I said quietly. You've been my rock, my light through all of this. You've shown me what real love looks like. Sophia's smile widened, and she leaned in to kiss me, her lips soft and reassuring. And you've shown me the same, she whispered. We've built this life together, Michael. That's what makes it so special. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her close as the room fell into a comfortable silence. My mind drifted back to the journey that had brought me here. The heartbreak, the self-doubt, the moments when I thought I'd never find happiness again. And yet, here I was, sitting beside the woman who had made everything worth it. Alicia's voice echoed faintly in my mind, a reminder of the life I had once envisioned but never truly lived. She had chased wealth and status, believing they would bring her happiness. But tonight, I had seen the truth in her eyes. Regret, not just for leaving me, but for the choices that had led her to a life that seemed far from fulfilling. And then there was Sophia, kind, grounded, and effortlessly elegant. She hadn't just filled the void Alicia left. She had created a new life with me, one built on trust, respect, and a shared vision of happiness. With her, I had learned that true wealth wasn't found in material possessions or fleeting status. It was found in moments like this, quiet, intimate, and full of love. You know what I realized tonight? I said, breaking the silence. What's that? Sophia asked, her voice soft. That everything I thought I lost with Alicia wasn't really a loss at all, I said. It was just clearing the way for something better. For you. She smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. I think we both needed each other, Michael, and I'm so glad we found our way here. We stayed like that for a while, wrapped in each other's arms, the rest of the world fading away. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. A peace that came from knowing I had finally let go of the past and embraced the life I had always deserved. As the clock ticked softly in the background, I thought about the future. It wasn't about chasing anything or proving anyone wrong. It was about living fully, with Sophia by my side. Together, we had built a life that was rich in ways money could never buy, a life defined by love, respect, and the quiet joy of knowing we had each other. And as I held her close, I realized that this was what it meant to live a life well lived. Not in the grand, dramatic gestures, but in the simple, profound moments that made every struggle, every heartbreak, and every triumph worth it. The past was behind me, and the future was ours. And for the first time in years, I felt truly, completely at peace.